Yeah, I'm Cathryn MacCallum. I'm a director of Cezanne Associates, which is a not-for-profit technical support provider, I suppose, consultancy, NGO, that does a lot of work with the natural resources sector, from things to do with tourism, forestry, through to mining and hydropower. And I also, other half of my life at the moment is working as head of ESG for a small gold mining project in Ethiopia, which is why I'm ensconced in this hotel this afternoon, because I just arrived this morning. So yeah, so that's me. So I actually come from a world that was driven by notions of social justice and environmental justice. And at the event we were at the other week, Sarah, the JOLSOC event, I was a little bit blown away, because in that I heard the term social justice used for the first time that I've ever heard it used in the context of mining and minerals and development. And I thought, gosh, at last, people are starting to realize this cannot just be about profit. Lean operations cannot just be about money. It cannot just be what is the dirtiest, fastest, cheapest way to get this stuff out the ground and sod everything else and everyone else, which is really, I think, what is the summary of what people think about mining, you know, from the three speakers through to a lot of people out there. And I don't think the mining sector has done itself any favors over the years. And I know when I say to people that I work with the gold mining project, the look on their faces at the moment, it's quite interesting. It's like, oh my God, how could you? You turncoat, what are you doing? And I think it's really, really interesting, because there is that global perception. There is a general perception of the evil and the badness of mining. And I think it presents a challenge for the mineral and mining sector, but also the anti-mining lobby, to think about how can the narrative be deconstructed? How can we unlearn what we've learned? How can we develop a critical perspective and make decisions that are informed from a range of different perspectives? And I think at the moment you've got a mining sector that is still very much living in its own paradigm and sees NGOs as things to be hated, which is the other interesting thing. When I started working in the mining sector, I said I came from the NGO sector, and people went, oh my God, can we even speak to you? You've done stuff with NGOs. And I had to then try and justify what an NGO was, to now, you know, the other side. So I think there's a lot of mistrust, a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation. And I think there is a huge need and huge opportunity for really just trying to, deconstruct both of those narratives and look at how we can use critical thinking, how we can use things like global learning to really enable a different understanding of where we are and what is needed. So I think a lot of people talk about mining and think about gold mining and has no purpose, has no value. And it perhaps doesn't for the green economy. But if I look at a country like Ethiopia that has coffee as its only source of foreign income, mining or gold mining in particular, presents its only other viable source of foreign income. And without a source of foreign income, it cannot engage effectively on the world stage. So, and that then comes down to big discussions about neoliberalism, which are not for this forum. But you know, I think there is a purpose, there's a requirement for both the critical raw materials in terms of this green economy and how they're sourced, but there is also a need for minerals that generate foreign income for economies to be able to depend upon. I think COVID has just shown how the value of gold is just, you know, it's exponential, the curve in its value at the moment. And that's because, you know, people want to have something that is secure than cash when there's all this debt in the world. So,
so Cathryn, do you, this might seem like quite a strange question, do you think that you have to be quite brave to work in the mining sector right now?
I think higher education is really struggling at the moment in terms of geology graduates and geophysical graduates and postgrads. And I think there is an acknowledgement that that has been seen as what was once a go-to course for interest rocks. It's now a not go-to course because it's associated with the evil world of mining. So I think, yeah, there does need to be courage on some levels, but I see it also as a challenge. I mean, not all mining companies are bad. Unfortunately, that old adage of, one rotten apple ruins the barrel is out there. And, and as we spoke, I think it was in 2020 that we first started talking about them, but I won't call them our friends, but, Rio Tinto, not really a friend of mine at all. I don't know them, but the likes of Rio Tinto haven't done the mining sector any good because of their just abuse of people's values and thinking that their need is greater than Indigenous cultural values in relation to a natural resource. So I think those actions, every time something like that happens, I think it sets us back 10, 15 steps, and we have to start again. I see a lot of good coming out in terms of the technology. There are projects like the research project I worked on, the Horizon Research Project, in fact, did some wonderful things in terms of looking at what needs to happen a European perspective for minerals and mining and exploration to be environmentally and socially acceptable. And I think open cast, as it was referred to, but open pit mining, as they say in the trade, which I had to learn, because I came into the sector calling it open cast mining as well. But the cast, the pits, what have you. I mean, I think it's that's the end of that type of mining. I think it's got to be more focused. Technology needs to be there to look at how you can create as small an impact as possible to get things out of the ground in a socially and environmentally acceptable way. And so there's a wonderful challenge there. And one of the speakers at the JOLSOC event said, there's a wonderful challenge out there for some of the, for the brains and the geophysicists and mining engineers and geologists to come up with some really innovative ways of how to extract ore in an acceptable way. And that should be exciting. So I think, but how do you share that is exciting? How do you share that there is an opportunity, an exciting opportunity? How do you encourage the next generation of geologists to actually engage in that challenge without them being scared of being, viled as evil and,
And I think that there's probably quite a lot of us here on the call who are thinking, yes, so where do we sit with regards to all of that? So Cathryn, in terms of the change that's going on at the moment, so investors, owners of these mines, for example, are perhaps used and perhaps even measure themselves with regards to the rate of return that they have on, certain amounts of capital invested. Now, my perception is that the cost of building a mine, etc., is going up because actually the range of activities that are absolutely vital with regards to this, not least because they allow you to build and maintain that social license to operate, etc., is there. What's your perspective on whether, I've heard, can you build a cheap mine anymore? What are your thoughts around about that?
Well, how do you define cheap? Are you looking at the actual capital that's required to develop and build the mine, or are you looking at the rate of return against the asset? And so if something is worth a lot, how much profit do we need to make? We did so at the end of the day, and I think that's a really good question for mining companies. How much profit do you actually need? Are you ever going to truly embrace the triple bottom line? Are you ever going to look at that need, of balancing sort of finance, social requirements and environmental requirements? Are you ever going to sort of buy into the notion that, nature has a right? Some governments are. There's quite a big sort of movement at the moment. India has just passed a a law that nature has a right. You know, it's been passed in other countries as well. You know, there's a bit of a groundswell of movement out there of, you know, the rights of nature to evolve, to regenerate. You know, and this first came about 40 years ago, but where are we now? So I think it's about how much profit. The cost of a cheap mine, what does cheap mean? You know, do people matter? Should people matter? Of course they matter. You know, do we have to endorse child labour and abuse of young people in the worst forms of labour to get a mineral that we want? Do we need to destroy an environment that we know very little about to get something that we think we want? Or are there other ways? You know, and there are other ways, there are always other ways. And it's a case of, you know, what is acceptable, but what level of human impact on the environment is acceptable, and what level of impact on people is acceptable.
So talking about other ways, and Veronique went there earlier on when I posed this question. And Cathryn, we discussed this question about 10 days ago, with regards to, okay, so if you have to choose, do you choose the 9-year-old or deep sea mining? And perhaps so what's your answer with regards to this question? Obviously, absolutely caveated with the fact that we shouldn't have to choose either. We should be able to do something better with regards to that. But just for the sake of exploring this discussion, what comes to mind for you, deep sea mining or the 9-year-old?
Okay, first of all, there is that notion out there, do no harm, isn't there? So in terms of deep sea mining, we don't know what harm we are doing. So why do it? We do not know. We do not know, as you know, as was said earlier, I think it was James that said, you know, we could be destroying the world so there are no more 9-year-olds to mine. So yeah, we do not know. We do not know enough about the deep sea bed to be able to even do exploration. So I cannot imagine a way in which deep sea mining can ever be acceptable. And I just can't imagine a way. You know, there are just so many unknowns. A 9-year-old, you know, what mining company in their own right, what technology company in its right mind is endorsing child labour, is endorsing some militia-owned and militia-run mines? You know, you had the fair trade person on this morning, the Cobalt Fair Trade, you know, and you know, there is another way, obviously. Otherwise, you know, she wouldn't have been speaking, and I listened to what she said. And there is another way. You know, you know, a lot of the technology companies are engaging in ESG due diligence of the supply chain. But is it a tick box due diligence, or are they actually really interested? Are they just like covering themselves so that they can say we've done this, so they can sell and don't really want to know the answers? And if they don't want to know the answers, why don't they want to know the answers? You know, and it's back to that profit and greed notion again, isn't it? So I think there shouldn't ever be a need for a 9-year-old to be working in a mining context. Child labour, worst forms of child labour are abhorrent, and they continue to be. But there are ways to manage that, and there are ways to address that. Deep sea mining is just, for me, it's just a no. It's an absolute no. As I say, you know, what is acceptable in terms of the level of human impact on the environment? What is unacceptable? And I think deep sea mining is unacceptable.
Great, thank you for that, Cathryn. And I think listening to one another work through this conundrum in our heads, and I think it's fascinating saying, okay, what can we control, what can't we control, so we can then perhaps lean into the 9-year-old context or situation or story and say, well, actually we understand how to maybe make sure that doesn't happen or improve that situation, etc. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just think there is a notion that, you know, there's an understanding, there's something you can do. If it's about people, you know, people are people, you know, people are, we're thinking beings, and what we do, how we do things can be informed by what we know. And I think it's, and in terms of what is acceptable and what is unacceptable can be determined, and people's opinions and values can be incorporated in that decision making. So I think, you know, we need to embrace the power in questions and in questioning, and I think that is really, really important. And I think also there is a need for the sector and for the general population and the consumers to be comfortable and to use the power of questions and questioning, so that, you know, not everything has to be comfortable, I guess. Not everything has to be comfortable. Not everything is known. Not everything is knowable, really, is it? But what is the unknowable? Deep sea mining. What is known is the 9-year-old, but we can do something about that. We can look at ways of developing, you know, whether it be looking at an understanding. And I think context was said earlier as well, and I've been saying it for a few years. It's all about the context. If you don't know the context, you can't even start to understand how and what decisions sort of should be made.
Great, thank you very much. Brilliant, thank you, Cathryn. So just to finish on this before we move into our next fantastic speaker, to Andy. Veronique was talking about how, you know, who cares what banner we put across all of this, we just need to get on and do it. So take the action, you know, show the impact. Do you have any final words or messages for us, really, with regards to just all of us just getting on and doing this rather than sitting here and talking about it?
Yeah, I think we need to deconstruct the narrative. I really think we do, and from both sides. I really think, I think the mining sector needs to wake up and realise that, you know, their role needs to be, as, especially if they're working in the global south, their role as a developing mine or an operating mine needs to be as a development partner to the area. And so they are expanding people's ability to choose and be what they value, not as an exploiter of the minerals and of the people in the area. And I think they need to really embrace that and realize that they're not, you mentioned colonialism this morning as well, I heard, and you know, a lot of mining companies have a very colonial approach to what they do. And there almost needs to be what I would refer to as, instead of them being the neo-colonialists, which is a space that they have inhabited for a very long time, the mining sector needs to become post-colonialists, and they need to change how they listen, change how they learn. They need to learn to unlearn and learn to listen and learn to change. And the consumers need to have an understanding of where everything comes from, so they need that global perspective as well. So I think there is some really good, solid, critical thinking of global perspectives needed from both sides, so that decisions that are made are informed. And yeah,
fantastic.
and we have a way forward. So
brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Cathryn. And actually, that whole change how we listen, change how we learn to unlearn. I think that really resonates so hard. And then also learn to change, because change is so difficult, and all of us changing as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So Cathryn, on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for dialing in from that hotel room in Ethiopia. Absolutely brilliant. Stay safe, have fun out there in actually with some of the rocks as